Don't eat that.
Don't eat that. 3 words. Not loud. Straight. Scary. They stopped him in the middle of his movement, with his silver fork hanging just a few inches from his lips. The voice belonged to a young black waitress. Her tone was low but forceful, like someone who had seen enough and couldn't stand to see anything further go wrong. He raised his head. The name tag on her shirt said, Zariah. Her eyes didn't just gaze into his, they reached in, as if they were looking for a truth that only they could see. Her hair was carefully pulled back in braids, and her outfit was tidy, but it was the look on her face, half fear and half defiance, that made his heart jump. It was a Tuesday night at Morrow Hall, the best place in Savannah for gourmet dining. People didn't look at pricing there. They looked at last names. Where black clients were typically received with stiff smiles and muted dismissals, if they were even greeted at all. Khalil Devereaux had come by himself, Oxfords that have been polished, jacket by Armani, posture that is calm. Even though he was elegant, the host took him straight to the worst table, which was right close to the bathroom. "We're fully booked," the hostess remarked, looking past him and then grinning at the clipboard. "Either this, or nothing." He nodded without saying anything. He had already done this, not just here, but worldwide. Airports, meeting rooms, clubs for golf. Being a black man with money didn't mean that people didn't regard you as black. When Trevor, a white guy with small lips, brought Khalil's drink, he said something under his breath. He put it down with a bit too much vigor. Laughter behind him. 2 other white staff smiled, as one put a crumpled napkin at Khalil's table like it was a trash bin. He heard one of them say, "Is that guy wearing designer?" They must have won the lotto. After that, the food came. A duck breast that was perfectly cooked, but it wasn't. Zariah had watched it happen. She had observed the other server throw something from his pocket into the plate. It was little, fast, thought out, and now she was next to him. She repeated again, even more quietly, "Don't eat that." He looked at her in confusion, then back down to the plate, then back to her. She looked around the room and murmured, "I shouldn't be saying this, but they did something to your food." That was when Khalil Devereaux, the rich CEO and quiet owner of this restaurant, stopped moving. Because he knew what this was. Not the food, not the joke, the way things work. A system that was so thoroughly ingrained in the culture of places like this that even his own workers didn't think of him as a person, let alone their boss. And what about Zariah? She had a lot to lose by warning him. That night, everything was different. This story isn't only about race, money, or revenge. It's a black story about respect. About the people who speak up even when it costs them everything, and the folks who eventually listen when it's almost too late. If you care about stories like this, subscribe to Hidden Worth. We tell the truth about things that have never been told before. One voice, one tale, and one moment at a time. Now, let me tell you what truly happened following those 3 words. Morrow Hall appeared like any other 5-star restaurant at first glance. Chandeliers sparkled like icicles frozen in time. White tables shone in gentle amber light, and a carefully chosen playlist of classical jazz played just quietly enough to indicate elegance, but loudly enough to drown out awkward silence. But you would see it if you remained long enough and paid attention. The design, the quiet sorting method that had nothing to do with reservations and everything to do with looks. It began at the host stand. No matter what time they got there, black guests were nearly always the last to be received. The grins were smaller, and the voices were less excited. Black guests were greeted with first names, or a frank party of 2, while white customers were called Mr. and Mrs. If a black couple came in wearing formal clothes, the hostess would look them up and down, pretend to check the system, and then say, "We're fully booked." But a white couple who weren't as suited up would stroll in behind them and get a table without any problems. It happened every night. The seating plan showed how people are still separated today. The big windows, the fireplace, and the wide archway that led to the garden view were all places where white customers were told to go. Black customers? Tables close to the doorway of the kitchen, next to the closet for coats. Or, like Khalil, close to the bathrooms, where the fragrance of bleach and lemon-scented disinfectant fought with the smell of truffle oil and rosemary lamb. And then there were the workers. A lot of them were white. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that they acted like they owned the property. as if they weren't only servers and bartenders but also judges of who did and didn't belong. Trevor, who had served Khalil before, was infamous for his smirks. He always made jokes that were hard to hear, not loud enough to be reported, but not so loud that his coworkers would laugh. Which one did he like best? Calling black customers out-of-zone diners. No one ever told him he was wrong. Some even took part. The people who worked in the kitchen weren't any better. A small group of line cooks saw their black coworkers as accessories, handy when needed but not when they weren't. One of them said, "I'd never eat food cooked by someone who listens to trap music while chopping onions." No one laughed, but no one said anything against it. Chad Finley was the manager too. Chad was smooth. He had a watch that cost more than Zariah made in 3 months, and a handshake that made your hand feel colder. He didn't shout or swear. No, Chad used civility as a weapon. He would coach Zariah, in front of other workers, by pointing out fake errors in her service and rewarding less skilled waiters with backpats and jokes. Chad would nod and add, "She's coming along," when customers complimented Zariah, as if her talent was a charity project he was in charge of. He never called her by name. He just called her our diversity star. But Zariah stayed anyhow. Why? Because her dreams were bigger than Chad's hate. She needed the money. Because Zion, her little brother, needed her. Because quitting would have meant giving them what they wanted. So she changed. She remembered not only the menu but also every regular guest's allergy notice, wine combination, and temperature preference. She learned how to keep her smile firm, even when she was so angry that her hands shook. She came early, remained late, and moved with the kind of grace that only comes from being in places that are meant to break you. But there were things she couldn't change, no matter how good she was. Like how her white coworkers would give her the heavier platters, or how they always made her clean up the disasters, like spilled wine, shattered glass, and even vomit from drunk customers. Or how Chad once told her in front of everyone, "Zariah, smile more. Your job is to make them feel at ease." She had a smile on her face, but she was starting a fire inside, in a quiet way. Be careful. When she said those 3 words, Khalil saw the fire raging behind her sweet eyes. Don't eat that. Because Zariah knows how to play. She had been playing it for months, for years, even. And at that time, with just one warning, she didn't only defend a consumer. She made a line in the sand. She told someone who had forgotten that dignity isn't something you get. People say it. And Khalil, well, he was starting to recall. This wasn't just a meal. This was a test. The actual story, the black story, was just getting started. He was just Khalil until he became Khalil Devereaux, a billionaire, restaurant owner, and CEO who was highlighted in Forbes. A thin boy from New Orleans who used to sit in the lobby with a bag of crackers and a worn-out Spider-Man notebook while his mother cleaned offices at night. He wasn't born into money. He was strong. Delilah, his mother, worked 3 jobs and never missed a shift. She made meals on the weekends, not merely to stay alive, but also for love. Her cornbread could stop the loudest fight, and her gumbo could make grown men cry. The kitchen was her church, her therapy, and her fighting ground. Khalil learned early on that food gave him strength. It brought people together and made them pay attention. But when Delilah sought to get a job as a sous chef at a cafe in the city, they looked at her skin and said the job had just been filled. Khalil made a vow, then. One day, he would create a restaurant where his mom could come in with her head held high and never be asked to leave. He worked in high school, flipping burgers, mopping floors, and keeping an eye on what the head cooks did. During the day, he went to a state college to study culinary science. At night, he washed dishes. By the time he was 28, he had saved enough money to buy a run-down soul food restaurant in Atlanta and turn it into a popular brunch spot. Next came the investors. Growth. Fame. Khalil Devereaux had a nationwide restaurant group with more than 60 sites and counting by the time he was 40. People who didn't like him labeled him the silent giant of the Southern fusion movement. He had a lot of money. Personal. Honored. And 95% of the individuals who worked for him had no idea what it was. That was on purpose. Khalil didn't put his face on billboards or restaurants. He thought the meal should be more important than the originator. But not being seen had effects. It let guys like Chad Finley put down roots in his empire. The type of boss who smiled at HR but allowed racism to eat away at the company's basis from the inside out. Khalil had heard concerns before. Messages without names. Whispers during board meetings. Some places aren't treating minority staff well. He constantly responded and started internal reviews, but nothing ever seemed to be enough. That changed when Zariah said 3 words. Don't eat that. It wasn't merely a warning about food that was bad. It was a call to action. A young woman put her job and maybe even her life on the line to help a stranger. That level of bravery was hard to find. It scared him. It made him think of his mother, who once stepped in between a landlord and their neighbor to avert an eviction, even though she knew it could get her kicked out too. Khalil didn't sleep that night after dinner. He sat in his rooftop apartment and looked out at the city below. He was waiting for the takeaway box he had asked for so he could send the meal to a lab. But he already knew deep within. He didn't need a report. He needed to see more. Khalil contacted his helper Melinda the next morning. He said, "Clear my calendar for the week." "Excuse me?" she said, evidently shocked. "I'm going to go undercover. As a busser. At Morrow Hall." There was no sound on the line. "Sir, that's dangerous. What if someone knows who you are?" "They won't. Believe me, most of them don't know who I am. And even if they do, they won't trust what they see." He laughed, although it was a touch bitter. "They see me as just another black man in an apron." Melinda let out a sigh. "I don't believe this is safe. I believe it's necessary." And that was the end of the decision. By the end of the day, Khalil had changed out of his tailored suits and into black pants, used sneakers, and a gray polo shirt that said, "Training Staff." He had trimmed his beard down to stubble and wore a cap low over his forehead. The calm CEO was gone. In his place was Marcus, a quiet man from Baton Rouge who wanted to start over. No one even blinked when he came via the back door of his own eatery the next day. The dishwasher nodded his head. The hostess didn't pay attention to him. The line cook threw him an apron and remarked, "Hope you like bleach, new guy." Khalil didn't move, because now he wasn't looking down from above. He was going into the dark, and he was ready to watch who would shine and who would die. Zariah Monroe had a grin that could calm a storm. It wasn't required. It wasn't the kind of smile you give when your boss instructs you to be nice. Hers was real warm, lived in, and honest. But if you looked a bit further, past that easy grin and those honey brown eyes, you would see something more. Tiredness. Not the kind that sleep fixes. The kind you feel in your bones when you've spent your whole life trying to fit in places that weren't meant for you. Zariah was 26 years old. She was born and reared in Augusta, Georgia. Her father left when she was 9, and her mother died when she was 18, only 2 weeks after she graduated from high school. Cancer of the breast, 4th stage. It's too late, too pushy, too costly to fight. From then on, it was just her and her little brother, Zion. Zion was autistic. He was smart and had a great heart. But the world didn't know how to make room for youngsters like him, especially black guys. Zariah worked 2 jobs to pay for his treatment, groceries, rent, and the occasional trip to the arcade for his birthday when she had the extra gas money. What was her dream? To start a soul food cafe called Della's, after her mother, where all the food was created from scratch, was cheap, and served with respect. She even wrote down recipes and drew floor layouts on napkins in a journal. It was in her purse, wedged between a bus timetable and unpaid utility bills. But dreams don't pay the bills. That is why she accepted the job at Morrow Hall. She was treated like a guest who had stayed too long from the start. The other servers called her Z. They thought it was easier than saying Zariah, like it took too much work to say her name. They'd giggle when they assigned her the rear tables near the kitchen. "That's your part, girl. You know what's going on." She never said anything. She needed the money, needed the advice, even when customers didn't leave much. Even when people looked right through her like she was just part of the wall. Chad, the manager, treated her like a list. He only praised her in front of other people when the company was around. What about the rest of the time? Notes in her locker that were passive-aggressive, criticizing her tone, pace, and posture. Her tone was always the same. He once told me, "You're coming off strong. Soft voices are what guests like here. Smiles that are softer." She didn't say anything. She just nodded, smiled, and went back out with a new glass of Pinot Grigio for table 12. But Zoraya had learned something important. Being kind doesn't make you weak. It's about staying alive. She brought additional napkins without being told to. She recalled anniversaries, allergies, and drink orders like they were secret codes that kept people safe. And over time, some regulars started to notice. Better tips. Said thanks. She put sticky notes on her receipts that said, "You're amazing." She put them all in a shoebox and put it under her bed, proof that she was important. Zoraya wasn't simply getting by. She was learning. Figuring out who to trust, who not to. Learning how to calm down drunk guests before security had to step in. She learned how to smile even when she wanted to scream. Learning how to carry twice as much weight, both physically and mentally, and make it appear like ballet. No one ever asked how she was doing, though. No one noticed that her wrists were swollen after 10-hour shifts, or that she had to ice her knees at night while assisting Zion with his homework. Not until that night. That night, she witnessed Trevor put something from his pocket into the dish for the well-dressed black man at table 7. She was cleaning plates when she saw the movement out of the corner of her eye. Fast. Think about it. She stopped moving, her heart racing. Then she saw Trevor laugh and walk away like nothing had happened. Zoraya looked at Chad. He saw it too. But he didn't move. Didn't care. She did it. She waited till the man was about to eat. Then she stepped in, her heart beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Don't eat that." 3 words, a whisper in the middle of a loud stillness. He looked up, not sure what to think. She leaned a little and spoke softly. "They messed with your food. Sorry. Please don't eat that." That was when everything changed. Someone noticed her for the first time as a person making a choice, not just as Zed or background noise. One that is harmful. A good one. Zoraya had no idea who the man was. She didn't know he owned the building, the menu, or the plates on the table. But she knew what it felt like to be right. And what about doing the right thing? It can start with 3 quiet words and a tired girl who won't let hate prevail. Not tonight. Zoraya has seen them do it before. The murmurs, the snickers, and the small jokes that weren't really jokes. Sometimes it was a toothpick that had been used and put in a drink. Sometimes they served the meal cold on purpose, even though they knew the customer wanted it hot. It was terrible sometimes. Just like tonight. She had just left the dish pit when she saw Trevor standing by the pass line. He had a ramekin of au jus in one hand and was tossing something from the other hand into a dish that was going to go out. It was quick, almost too quick to see if you weren't looking. But Zoraya had learned how to gaze. That's how she stayed alive. Trevor smiled. Not the kind of smile you give when you finish a job properly, but the kind a youngster gives after plucking the wings off a fly. The manager, Chad, was only a few feet away. He didn't utter a word. He only smiled a little and turned back to the front of the house, checking his watch as if he had something more important to do. Zoraya's heart sank. She walked over slowly and without a care, acting like she was checking her part, but she couldn't take her eyes off the platter. Mignon filet, potatoes mashed with truffles, asparagus on the grill. The sauce was black and thick, and it sat in the middle like it was hiding something. Trevor folded his arms and leaned against the wall. He murmured under his breath, but loud enough for her to hear, "Hope he likes the chef's special." "Who?" Zoraya inquired, even though she already knew. "That man who is fancy. The person who feels they own the place." Table 7. Her stomach got tight. She looked toward the dining room. There he was. The man she had just cautioned a few minutes ago. The man with the gentle gaze and the quiet power. The man who sat up straight, as if the air surrounding him needed permission to rest. He was opening up his napkin. Zoraya took a deep breath and proceeded to the line. "Do you need something?" Trevor inquired, seeming to be nice. She didn't say anything. She just grabbed the platter. "Hey, that's not your table." "I know." Then she turned around and walked right up to table 7. Every step felt like it was getting heavier. It felt like something heavy and invisible had poured into the carpet. She wasn't sure what Trevor had placed in the dinner, but she knew enough. Enough to put her job on the line, her pay, all of it. The man looked up as she got closer. He grinned in a nice way. He was going to thank her when she bent over, put the plate down softly, and murmured those 3 words. "Don't eat that." His face transformed right away. from warmth to being lost. Then it went deeper. Worry, acknowledgement, maybe even comprehension. Zariah didn't give him a chance to answer. She went away after turning around. She walked straight past the kitchen and the manager's office and into the staff hallway. Then she went into the bathroom. She locked the door to the stall and sat down on the lid of the toilet. Her hands were shaking. She took her phone out, opened a text message that wasn't meant for anyone in particular. They did it again. This time I stopped it. But how many times did I miss it before? She never sent it. I just looked at the flickering cursor. Trevor laughed in the kitchen. What's wrong with her? Chad shrugged his shoulders. You're lucky she didn't cause a scene. She wouldn't. Not with the rent she's paying. That was all there was. A crime that isn't serious. A shared grin. A truth hidden by layers of silence, collusion, and power. But nobody understood that the man at table 7 wasn't just another well-dressed black customer. He was the hurricane they had never seen coming. And what about Zariah? She had just been the thunderbolt that tore the sky apart. Sometimes, injustice doesn't blow out. It merely simmers, until someone has the guts to ratchet up the heat. And all of a sudden, quietness isn't so quiet anymore. Khalil Devereaux had not spoken for too long. He didn't finish his lunch that night after Zariah spoke those 3 words. Did not talk to the staff. He didn't call his lawyers or send emails to the regional directors. He just stood there, nodded at her in a way that said a lot, and walked out into the warm night in Savannah. But things changed when he came home. He stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse and looked out over the city as if he were looking at a place he no longer knew. He had spent years establishing an empire of restaurants, franchises, and high-end dining experiences all throughout the country. He thought that only by being successful would the world respect men who looked like him. He was reminded, nevertheless, that respect doesn't come from stock prices or Michelin stars. Culture is what makes it work, and the culture at Morrow Hall was bad. So he chose what to do. He met with Melinda, his assistant, in the executive boardroom the next morning. He poured himself a black coffee and stated, "I'm going undercover." Melinda blinked. "Where are you undercover?" "Hall of Morrow. I want to know what happens when the person who gets the check isn't there." "Are you serious?" "I've never been more serious. You could send someone else or hire a consultant." He cut in and said, "No, this has to come from the top. From the man they didn't pay attention to. From the man they didn't respect. They need to feel the truth right now." Melinda leaned back in her chair. "What do you want?" He smiled. "An apron, a false CV, and a new name." That's how Marcus Green came to be. 39 years old, just moved here from Baton Rouge. No professional training in restaurants, but a hard worker willing to learn. There were no red signs on social media, just a faded ID, a friendly handshake, and a basic desire to make ends meet. The disguise worked perfectly. Khalil cut off his beard. Wore clothes from a thrift store. Black pants that didn't fit right, shoes that were scuffed and didn't slip, and a button-down shirt that was one size too big. He put on a plastic digital watch with a crack across the face and left his Rolex in the safe. He even made his walk a little limp, just enough to look meek and maybe even forgettable. He stared at himself in the mirror. Not the billionaire Khalil Devereaux. Only Marcus, a different black man trying to make some money. The next day, he came through the back entrance of Morrow Hall, the restaurant he owned, and no one knew who he was. There was no one there to say hello. No one offered to show him around. The chief server threw him an apron. She said, "Don't break anything." The kitchen manager looked at his resume and laughed. "Training starts now. Get a mop." And just like that, Khalil now, Marcus, was on the first floor of his own business, washing dishes next to a teenager with headphones in and a line cook who smelled like bad cologne and menthols. He was already sweating a lot by the second hour. He had learned more about his firm by the third hour than he had ever learned in a board meeting. He saw Zariah get the worst parts. He witnessed Chad patting the white servers on the shoulder, laughing at inside jokes, and entirely ignoring Zariah except when he was scolding her for stuff she didn't do. He saw Trevor make fun of people who don't tip as he was serving black families, and he kept watching Zariah, still smiling, still elegant, still keeping it together, like if the whole restaurant were a stage and she were putting on a show for someone she hoped would care. She didn't know who he was yet, but when they looked at one another across the prep line, something happened, a hint of familiarity, a query in her eyes that she never said out loud. Khalil gave a nod and kept on mopping. That night, he went back to his apartment and looked at himself in the mirror again. He was exhausted, sore, and humbled. He wasn't acting in this part. This was who he was before he got rich, before the cases, before people acted like he was different. Marcus wasn't dressed up. Marcus was just a memory. And this time, he wasn't going to leave until everyone in the restaurant took off their masks, not just his. Oppression doesn't often seem like violence, though. It looks like a habit sometimes, like giving the dirtiest mop to the same person every time, like when they tell you to clock out 5 minutes early so they don't have to pay you for the whole hour. When you lift more than you should, even though your back hurts every night, you could hear someone say, "You people are just so naturally strong." Marcus had been through it all by the third day. He wasn't just watching things from the outside anymore. He was in it, living it, feeling it, the loop of it, the cycle that Zariah had obviously been locked in for way too long. She came in early every morning, before most of the workers. Her hair was immaculate, her apron was folded, and her outfit was pressed. She checked the silverware again, replenished the water pitchers, and got her section ready, even though she always got the worst tables. And she was always the last to leave, cleaning up spills that she didn't make, without being asked, polishing silverware, carrying the emotional weight of a place that never truly accepted her but also never really pushed her away. Khalil and Marcus observed her, not like some men watched ladies work. No lingering glances. There was no hunger in his eyes. He looked at her like a survivor looks at another survivor. They were both quiet and moved around the restaurant like ghosts in a setting that was meant to make them look like they weren't there. He had watched Trevor spill a glass on purpose so that Zariah would have to pick it up. Another server called her Zippy when she was running between tables, making fun of her for moving too quickly. Saw Chad put her in charge of a private party of 13 people all by herself, while 2 white servers shared a party of 6 people. She smiled through it all, but not the same way. Marcus could now see the fractures growing behind it. The way her jaw twitched when no one said thank you. The way she paused before answering Chad with a strained, "Yes, sir." The way she rubbed her wrist when no one was watching. Marcus stayed over one night soon before closing to help clean the back counters. Zariah was emptying out the dessert fridge, and her eyes were weary. "Have you ever thought about quitting?" he asked in a quiet voice. She stopped for a moment and then laughed a little. "Not happy. Just truthful," she said. "Every shift." Marcus nodded. "So why not?" With her arms folded, she leaned on the counter. She said, "My little brother. He's getting help. Needs it once a week. It isn't covered by insurance. It's time to pay rent. You know what I mean." He did, more than she could possibly imagine. "And besides," she said, "they win if I quit." "Who's they?" She smiled, but this time it wasn't a happy smile. "The people who think I don't belong here." There was a break. "You do belong," Marcus said. Zariah was astonished when she saw him. "Thanks," she responded in a quiet voice. "Most days I don't feel it." At that point, things changed between them. A thread of comprehension, of common hardship, empathy, not from pity, but from understanding. Marcus had spent most of his career above it all, managing spreadsheets, establishing brands, and sitting on panels in air-conditioned conference rooms, lecturing about diversity and hospitality while drinking cold brew. But what about now? He remembered now. How it felt to not be seen. What it meant to work too much and not get enough respect. What it takes to keep going and grin through it all. He came home that night with painful feet and a lump in his throat. Khalil Devereaux, the billionaire, the tycoon, and the man who could buy and sell buildings, felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not being able to do anything, but with it came understanding. Writing another memo wouldn't change the system. It wouldn't become better just because he talked at a gala. It would only change when the people who were hiding behind power had to deal with the truth. And maybe, just maybe, it would start with 2 people who weren't supposed to meet. A janitor and a waitress. A woman who keeps everything together. And a man finally remembering what he had forgotten. Zariah and Marcus left Morrow Hall through the back entrance just after midnight. The sound of kitchen fans stopped, and the sound of crickets and a car stereo passing by in the distance took over. Zariah took a big breath, untied her apron, rolled it up into a ball, and threw it in her bag. "You always walk home?" Marcus asked, fixing the cap on his head. "Most nights," she remarked, looking up at the sky. "It's quiet. It gives me time to contemplate." He walked next to her in silence for a while. The streetlights cast a soft orange glow over them, and they looked like old friends who didn't need to talk to each other. She broke it after a few blocks. "Do you ever feel like you were made for more?" She looked at Marcus. "Every day." She really did smile at that. "I thought that feeling would go away," she remarked. "Once you get a job and pay your bills, you stop dreaming." But it never did. It just got silent. It seemed like it didn't want to mess with my life. "What's the dream?" he asked. She thought about it for a bit, then reached inside her bag and took out a small, old notepad. The cover was broken, the corners of the pages were twisted, and some of them had light water stains. She gave it to him. "Page 12, she said. He carefully opened it. It was a hand-drawn picture of a lovely cafe with huge windows letting in sunlight, wooden tables, handwritten menus on chalkboards, and a shelf full of jars of pickled vegetables and peach preserves. Della's Kitchen was written in big letters at the top. He raised his head. Zariah replied gently, "My mom's name was Della. She could make anything to eat, turned anything we had into magic. That's how she showed she cared." Marcus looked at the sketch again before turning the page. Directions, notes, timetables, ideas for events in the community, names of schools in the area, even the estimated prices of rent and materials. He remarked, "You built this, almost in wonder." "One piece at a time," she said. "Every night after work. I added something new every time I wanted to give up." "Why haven't you opened it yet?" Zariah chuckled, but there was agony in her voice. "Dreams cost more than hope," she replied. "And the world doesn't always give money to girls like me." They got to a corner where the lighting wavered, making the shadows on the pavement lengthy and shaky. "Have you ever tried to get investors?" Marcus inquired. She shook her head. "You believe that folks like Chad will give money to a black girl with no degree and a brother who needs help? Please. When I say the term business, I can see how they look at me. It's like I'm trying on shoes that don't fit." Marcus felt something in his chest get tight. Not because she was incorrect, but because she was right. He was aware of the numbers. He had seen how money moved about and how much tougher it was for black women to secure funding, even when they had better plans, sharper minds, and more guts than half of the candidates combined. But Zariah didn't stop. She was still writing in the notebook, still having faith. She still came every night and carried a dream in her bag like it was simply another thing to do at work. At that moment, Marcus didn't see a worker. He observed a person who started something. A person with a vision. Someone who didn't only want to get by in the system but change it. He stated in a low voice, "You're going to do it." She raised her eyebrows and glanced at him. "Della's Kitchen. It's going to happen. I can feel it." She mocked. "You don't even know me that well." He said, "I know enough. You kept someone safe when no one else did. You started a business with just time and faith. That's more than I've seen from most CEOs." She smiled again, but this time there were tears in her eyes. No one had ever said that to her before. Not that way. Not for sure. She muttered, "Thanks, Marcus." "Anytime, Zariah." They continued going, and under that flickering streetlight, two people who were hurting, tough, and hopeful took one more step, not just toward home, but toward something bigger. Because faith doesn't always yell. It walks next to you at night in worn sneakers, carrying your fantasies without asking for anything in return. That night, faith had a name. Zariah. The next shift started out like any other. Bright lights, clinking glasses, and phony grins on top of actual tiredness. Zariah had just clocked in when she sensed something was wrong. The schedule didn't have her name on it. Not in section A, B, or even the back patio. She glanced again after rubbing her eyes and checking again. Nothing. "Hey, Tamra," she questioned the hostess. "Where am I going tonight?" Tamara didn't take her eyes off her clipboard. "Talk to Chad." And she did. She saw him near the wine fridge, fixing a tie that was always a bit too tight for how smug he was. "You took me off the list?" Chad looked at her and smiled, but the grin never reached his eyes. "I did." "Why?" He tapped the side of his iPad as if he were scrolling. "Problems with performance." Zariah's heart raced. "Problems with performance? You've been sidetracked recently. Skipped a few steps. We've heard from customers. She looked at him in shock. That's not true. Who says that? He asked in a calm voice. You know I'm one of the best servers here, he responded. That's subjective. In a voice that sounded like oil. No, she answered, rising up straight. It's not. Every month, my sales are in the top 3. My tips speak for themselves. Chad didn't care. Zariah, this isn't personal. It's just about keeping up with the rules. She felt her throat constrict, but she wouldn't let him see her flinch. Why is that really? He turned his head. Maybe it's because you're talking to customers in a low voice, giving out a weird feeling. And there it was. Zariah stopped. She whispered gently. You saw what Trevor did. Chad's smile grew frigid. What I observed was you breaking the rules for serving food, making guesses, putting your team down. Are you protecting him? I'm looking out for this business, she said less. You are keeping yourself safe. He leaned in a little and spoke more quietly. Do you really think you're irreplaceable here? You think that a nice grin and a few regulars who like you make you untouchable? This place has been open for a long time, and it will stay open after you leave. Zariah's fists were tight at her sides. What do we do now? You're putting me on hold? Oh no, he said in a fake happy voice. You'll still be working. She squinted her eyes. You're doing the dishes this week. She couldn't breathe. You're putting me in the back? You wanted hours. You have them. You're doing this to make me feel bad. I'll let you stay if you want to. You can leave if that doesn't work for you. She stood there, looking at him, and the taste of anger and shame mixed on her tongue like bad wine. But she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just nodded once, turned around, and walked to the rear. When Marcus saw her again, she was already putting on a kitchen apron around her waist. She didn't say anything, did not look at each other. He went into the dish pit after her. Are you okay? He asked quietly. For a long time, she didn't answer. She just stood at the sink and let the hot steam fog up her glasses. She finally added, Back here feels like a punishment cell. No tips, no light, not respect. I know. She turned her head a little bit. I didn't do anything wrong, Marcus said again. I know. She nodded, not because she agreed, but because she had to prevent herself from breaking down. Then she laughed, one sound that is bitter. Do you know what's crazy? I've done everything they told me to. Worked harder than everybody else. Never made a fuss. I never raised my voice. And still, she didn't finish what she was saying. She didn't have to. Marcus took a little folded paper towel out of his pocket and gave it to her. What is this? She opened it. There was just one piece of chocolate inside, and it was from the front of house platter, which is only for VIP guests. He answered. It's not much. But I thought someone should treat you like you matter. Zariah didn't move for a second. Then she took a long breath and took the chocolate. Thank you, she said softly. Marcus nodded. She put it in her mouth and closed her eyes. The sweetness melted on her tongue, reminding her that there was still kindness in this bitter place, even if it was little, even if it came from someone the world had already decided wasn't important. Because often the worst blows don't come from fists, they come from folks in neat shirts and excellent posture who use policy as a weapon. But what about Zariah? She wasn't hurt. She was bowing. And everyone knows about objects that bend too far? They do eventually snap back. It happened so quickly, but it seemed to happen in slow time. For years, the guy they called Marcus Green had been watching discreetly from the dish pit, the service line, and the back hall. The rich owner of Morrow Hall, Khalil Devereaux, was the man behind the name Marcus. His co-workers didn't know this. The whole restaurant changed when the truth came out. It was Friday night, the busiest time of the week, and the dining room was full with laughing, the sound of glasses clinking, and the subtle hum of jazz that was always playing in the background. Khalil was serving table 12, a white couple in their early 40s, while wearing the apron he had borrowed. As he set down the dessert plates, a photographer from the local magazine walked in with a camera around his neck. Isn't that Marcus Green? A whisper spread right away. The photographer grinned, lifted his camera, and took a picture of Khalil passing out the plates without thinking. A customer gasped, Wait, isn't that the founder of the Devereaux restaurant group? By the time the dessert was done, the news had spread quicker than the food runners could transport platters. In less than 10 minutes, Everyone who worked at the front of the home was clicking their phones and sharing the picture. Chad, the manager, saw the first wave of panic in his eyes. He walked up to Khalil in the service corridor and said, "Who are you?" in a low voice. "What's going on?" Khalil didn't say anything. Instead, he took off his apron, looked him in the eye, and said, "You already know who I am." At that point, the room seemed smaller. The tables felt more crowded, the lighting was sharper, and the air was thicker. Employees who previously made fun of out-of-zone diners stopped laughing. Trevor's smile went away. Customers could feel the tension, and some even whispered, "Something's going on here." Zariah was cleaning up beside the kitchen door when she heard the noise. She looked up just as Khalil was about to walk by. When their eyes met, she didn't look surprised. Instead, she looked like she knew him and felt betrayed. How many times had she saved a plate? How many times had she seen unfairness? And now the man she had protected and cautioned was getting his name back. Khalil set up a staff meeting for 8 a.m. the next day. At that time of day, the dining room was usually quiet. But now it was full of everyone who worked there. Servers, bussers, cooks, and dishwashers. They sat and stared at the stranger who had hidden among them. He started by saying, "My name is Khalil Devereaux. I own this network of restaurants. I came here as Marcus Green because I needed to see what I couldn't see from my office." The room was quiet. Some people became red. Some people bowed their heads. Some people merely looked. He kept going, his voice steady. "I saw everything you see. I felt what you feel. I let patterns I said I would cease happen. I'm sorry for that." The air was so thick with silence that it seemed like glass. Then there were questions. "Why didn't you tell us?" one cook yelled. "Why do you want us to serve you like we were serving someone else?" asked a server. Khalil took a big breath. "Because I had to know. Because you can't just expect respect. You have to work for it. I wasn't making money if no one could see me." Chad moved around in his seat near the back of the room. The realization? He had been working for the system, not the people. Khalil stood at the front and said, "We will rebuild. We shall learn. We will change things around. Instead of closing doors, we shall open them. Yes, I will start with you, Zariah Monroe." He stopped. The chamber let out a sigh. He nodded. "Zariah, you will be the executive chef's assistant. You will be in charge of a pilot team of cooks from different backgrounds. You will redesign Della's kitchen concept as our first model." Zariah blinked, shocked. "And for that, you will have complete creative control." She had tears in her eyes, but not of sympathy. They were tears of validation. Khalil turned back to the staff. "This is the first step. There will be change, but only if we walk it together." That same day, when the dining room was busy again, Khalil's umbrella license lost its privacy. Billionaire CEO surprises staff by working as line server, made the news in the area. Social media went crazy. Some people appreciated his openness, while others accused him of using secret audits to get what he wanted. But no matter what the hubbub was, the culture of Morrow Hall changed. Zariah saw the difference. The jokes Chad made in the corner didn't mean as much anymore. Trevor's smirks went away when clients gave her more than just a grin. People told experiences about being invisible at the start of staff meetings and came up with remedies at the end. Khalil's choice to show himself didn't just show who he was. It also showed how the system worked. Things that were hidden become clear. People started to reassess what they had been okay with. And for once, the restaurant wasn't merely a place to pay expenses. It had a purpose. When the last visitors left that night and the lights went out, Zariah found Khalil in the kitchen cleaning his apron again. She murmured softly, "You kept your word." He gazed at her, exhausted but real. "I'm keeping more than one." They all left Morrow Hall together. The stars were pallid over Savannah outside. Lights still shone through the windows inside, and the air was filled with something new, possibility. Khalil had been exposed, and in that exposure, they found the first part of a narrative worth telling. The next morning started out like any other. The ventilation system hummed softly. Coffee cups clinked in the back room, and servers arrived for their shifts with soft footfalls. But for Zariah Monroe and Khalil Devereaux, the day felt different because the calm was more intense. Before the restaurant opened, Zariah got there. The aprons were hanging up, the silverware was shined, and the tables were lined up perfectly with linen on top. But there was one thing wrong. She wasn't supposed to be in any section. Her name was written above "off" instead of a station. Her heart sank. She took the same path down the kitchen hallway, past the dish pit, and into the staff room. There was a stench of chlorine and takeout boxes in the staff lounge. She thought she would see pleasant people. She didn't see anything. Instead, she heard nothing. She understood what this meant. The night before, she had put things in a box. Her journal has the Della's kitchen blueprint in it, some simple clothes, and the few suggestions she had hidden. She texted her little brother, Zion Monroe, a short text to let him know she would be staying with their aunt for a bit. She didn't wait for permission. She sensed when a place was no longer safe. Now, she was sitting in the staff lounge with the box at her feet, staring at the ceiling tiles. She didn't hear the door open. She could only feel the presence next to her. Khalil, who was still in normal clothing from his undercover shift but had the sharpness of a CEO behind his eyes, sat down across from her. The room seemed smaller. The air was thicker. "Zariah," he said gently at first. She didn't look up. "I need to talk to you." She put her journal away. "There's nothing else to say. Please." At that point, she lifted her head. She had a guarded look in her eyes. "You told the staff this morning," she said, "about the change, about who you are, and then you took it all away." He nodded. "I know. You promised. Big promises. You put me in charge. You told me you believed in me." "I do." "Then why am I not on the schedule? Why are you making me invisible again?" Khalil's throat got tight. He could fire people, change the organization of departments, and rewrite contracts, but he didn't know how to solve it. "I tried," he said. "Then try harder," she said. "Because I can't stay here and watch you fix the broken parts like you're putting duct tape on a cracked foundation." He stared at the box at her feet. "Are you leaving?" "Yes," she answered in a calm voice. "I'm going now. You have to do what you say, not just stand on the stage." He had a hard time swallowing. "You don't believe me?" "It's not trust," she remarked. "It's experience. I know what happens when words sound good but things stay the same." He shut his eyes. It was strange for someone who was used to closing agreements, negotiating conditions, and using money to say he wasn't sure. "Does it always have to look like this?" he asked. "Do I have to wait for the person I want to help to leave before I do anything?" Zariah stood up and picked up the box. "Maybe you do." She stopped at the door. "If you really want to change, don't come after me when the news turns green. Don't ask me to come back when the cameras are on. Please ask me to come back when the schedules are fair, when the kitchen isn't a place for punishment. Don't follow me from the hallway to the dining room," she added, turning away. "I'll be here when those things happen." And she went. The door clicked softly shut behind her. Khalil was by himself in the staff lounge. The fluorescent light above flickered. His coffee got cold, and the weight of all he had put off doing was heavy on him. He gazed around at the vacant chairs, the box that was still there, and the sound of her footsteps. He understood how loud stillness might be. He had defined success for years by how many locations, how much growth, and how big the margins were. But at that time, all that mattered was one person, one voice he had failed to keep. He got up and proceeded to his office. The hallway appeared the same, but he could now feel the fissures. The walls that used to look strong now looked like they had been patched up too many times. The floor that he used to walk on with confidence now felt uneven. He was sitting at his desk. The lights in Savannah's metropolis twinkled like stars in the distance. He took out his phone and sent a text that said, "Can we talk?" He looked at the name of the person who answered, Zariah. He thought about it, getting rid of it. Then they typed again, "I get it." The message was read right away, but no one replied. He shut his eyes. The noise of his own company's kitchens, the clatter of dishes, and the hum of happy diners all felt empty without her light in the room. Billion-dollar companies and global brands didn't matter if one strong and dignified young woman left. Khalil learned something during that crisis. Power wasn't what he thought it was. He didn't think influence was what it was. It was important to stand behind someone, not over them. He worked at his desk all night. The sole light came from a lamp on the desk and the brightness of the metropolis outside the window. He promised himself one thing, not the press or the board. He would alter it, not so she would come back, but so she would remain when she did. He posed the question he had buried a long time ago in the quiet. What kind of legacy am I really leaving? The next day, Khalil Devereaux didn't show up to the corporate boardroom. He didn't go back to his rooftop office with a view of the Savannah River, or to the leather-backed chair where he built an empire with a pen. Instead, he drove to each of the 6 restaurants in his chain, starting with the smallest one in Macon, Georgia. No press, no group of friends, no polished speech. Only him. A man in jeans and a plain shirt walked into kitchens and sat down with line cooks, bussers, and dishwashers, people no one had ever asked. What would make this job worth staying for? He had a little notebook with him. There was only one word on the first page. Listen. Luis, a dishwasher, told him that he hadn't had a meaningful break in 3 years. To a pastry cook named Angie, who said she was afraid to wear her natural curls because management said they weren't professional. To a server named Theo, who said he was gay but never felt safe being himself at work. Every narrative made Khalil's armor weaker. Each narrative made him write faster. The notebook was full by the end of the week. Not with policy, but with pain. And Khalil knew that changing the outside would never fix the inside. He flew back to Savannah with a strategy in mind. The doors to Morrow Hall didn't open at noon on Monday like they usually do. Instead, the crew came in to find that the dining room had been turned into a forum. The tables were set up in a circle, coffee and muffins were lined up on a long table, and a big whiteboard in the middle said, "This is where we start over." Khalil stood in front of them, not as the CEO, but as a man who had let down the people who were helping him develop his dream. "Today," he said, "no one is helping anyone. Let's chat." Some people had their arms crossed, some people rolled their eyes. There was a lot of doubt in the air. He gave the marker to the youngest person in the room, a busboy named Jordan, and told him, "You go first." Jordan blinked and then moved ahead. "I believe," he said, "I think we need a real break schedule. Everyone gets 15 minutes. Not simply the front of the house." He scrawled it on the board. Next, a server walked in and asked for training on how to avoid bias. Then, a cook asked for money for emergencies in the household. They all talked one at a time, and Khalil didn't say anything. He nodded his head, wrote things down, asked questions, not as a boss, but as a learner. There were 27 points on the board by the end of the day. Khalil got back up. He said, "These aren't suggestions. These are their orders to march. They start today." The next few weeks were a blur. All managers have to go through training on empathy and fairness. A new mentoring program started, combining experienced staff of color with coaches who help people become leaders. The punishment schedule for kitchen workers was thrown out. Everyone in every branch and hall had heard Zariah's story, and no one wanted to be the next Chad. By the way, Chad was gone. A black woman called Sierra Rhodes, who had been in charge of hospitality for 15 years and was known for changing broken cultures into successful ones, took over as general manager without making a big deal out of it. The business gave its workers a mental health allowance. They got new uniforms that fit everyone. We established a training program for the kitchen for staff who wanted to open their own places someday. They called it the Zariah program. Khalil went back to each restaurant, this time with Sierra at his side, and said, "From now on, every hire, every policy, and every leader will be judged by how we treat our people." But even as everything changed, one thing stayed the same. Zariah. She hadn't replied to his texts. She didn't pick up the phone when he called. Not even when her name was in the news for his internal changes. Khalil nonetheless made sure she had a seat at every leadership meeting. Every week, he left a printed invitation in the Morrow Hall break room with Zariah Monroe's name scribbled at the top. Not as a sign, but as a promise. Not to make her happy, but to get her. Because the path to set things right wasn't about getting back at someone. It wasn't about making him seem better. It was about finally becoming the guy he should have been when she first said those 3 words to him across the table. "Don't eat that." I had to lose her to really hear it. He was now paying attention to everything. It had been 3 months since Zariah left Morrow Hall. Not with wrath, but with determination. She didn't go away. She rebuilt. Every weekend, Savannah's River Street came to life with local artists, jazz musicians, and the scent of wonderful cuisine in the hot, humid southern air. But now it was the smell of cinnamon sweet potato hash, honey chipotle wings, and a cornbread recipe that had been passed down from a woman named Della Monroe that made heads turn. Zariah stood behind the open window of her matte black food truck. Above her, a lighted sign said, Della's Wheels. There were stains on her apron. She wore a bandana to hold her curls back. What songs does she like? R&B from the 1,990 seconds. And her grin, as bright as ever. The first week was slow. But by the second, people started to line up. Word got around quickly. One man held up a basket like it was gold and said, Best catfish sandwich in Savannah. Zariah's menu was simple yet bold. It was soul food with a modern touch. No easy ways out. No chemicals. No giving in. Each dish had a story to tell. And what about the regulars? They were aware. Did you use your mom's gumbo recipe again? An old woman questioned. Zariah gave a wink, with a little more sass. But there was grit underlying the tastes and charm. She had spent all of her savings, got a small loan from a credit union in the area, had her small brother Zion help her paint the truck by hand. For weeks, I only slept 4 hours a night. No sponsors, no safety net. Just belief. Some days went by slowly. She cried in the back of the truck some nights when the fryer broke or a vendor didn't show up. But she never stopped coming. She never stopped trusting in her own hands. Zariah offered weekend cooking classes at the community center on her days off, which were few and far between. She didn't ask for much money. A lot of teens. Mostly females who thought dreams were exclusively for those on the covers of magazines. But Zariah made them think it was true. She told them, This truck used to be nothing more than a drawing in a notebook. Now it's real. So can yours. She had a modest workforce by the 3rd month. Zion helped with the orders. Her companion Maya handled the books. And every now and again, someone from the city would notice her. A story in the local eats section of Savannah Now. A little piece on the news at night. And the whispers started again, this time about the girl who turned a whisper into a shout. She didn't show off how well she was doing. She kept telling stories when she served dinner. A tall man in a gray hoodie, sunglasses, and a low cap came in one day in the late afternoon. At first, he didn't say anything. I just looked at the menu. Zariah was busy putting things in a box to take home. Do you want a combo plate or a single plate? She asked, not looking up. He coughed. What are the house specials today? He asked. She stopped moving. That voice. It has been a long time. But you never forget a voice that changed everything for you. She raised her head. Khalil Devereaux was in front of her truck. No guards, no reporters, just a guy who missed the one person he looked up to the most. She didn't say anything. He put a $20 bill on the counter. He said, One of everything. She raised an eyebrow. Are you sure you can do that? He grinned. Only if it has a story. Zariah nodded once, turned around, and began to plate. She didn't ask him why he was there. She didn't have to. People don't always come back to ask for forgiveness when they leave. They come back to see what blossomed from the seeds they once disregarded. Zariah was no longer the server. She owned it, and now she had wheels. She didn't need doors to open for her. She made her own engine. And with every mouthful that left her food window, she wasn't just giving folks food. She was giving belief food. That in a world that was meant to ignore females like her, she could park right in the heart of the story and serve something that would last forever. The sun set over Savannah in the evening, sending golden rays across River Street. There weren't as many people at Della's Wheels anymore. The fryer was not on. The windows shut. Zariah was inside the food truck, leaning against the back wall and drinking cold sweet tea. She was tired, and her fingers were sore from washing pots, but her heart was full. Khalil had come and gone. He only wanted food, no big speeches, no business offers. He ate in silence, nodded once, and then left like any other customer. But there was the thing. He wasn't just a customer. She could tell by the way he walked away that he had finally learned what she had always known. Change doesn't happen in front of cameras. It happens without noise. It happens while no one is looking. She was getting ready for bed when she saw something stuck under the napkin holder's corner. An envelope that is tiny. No name, no sign. Inside is just a clean white card. It had 3 words written in Khalil's unmistakable handwriting on it. You were right. Zariah's heart raced as she looked at it for a time. There was a time and an address on the reverse of the card. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. She thought about whether or not to go. She didn't have to do anything for him. But her gut, The same gut that urged her not to serve that platter months earlier told her that this moment was important. She left. The address wasn't an office or a boardroom. It was a quiet corner lot in a region of the city that needed work. Weeds broke the sidewalks. The paint came off the buildings. But there was something surprising in the middle of the lot. A steel frame being welded together. People in hard hats walked around a concrete base. Zariah walked up slowly, not knowing what she was looking at. After that, she spotted the sign. Zariah's table is coming soon. She came to a complete stop. A man wearing pants and a hoodie walked up to her. "Khalil, you did this?" she questioned, her voice barely above a whisper. He answered, "No, you did. I didn't ask for this. I know. But the city needs it. You are needed." She turned to look at him. "So what, this is how you plan to fix it?" He shook his head. "No. This is your plan. Your name. Your meal. I'm just putting money into what you already made." She didn't move. The sun climbed higher behind the picture. She could see it now. Big windows, a teaching kitchen in the rear, room for youth to learn, communal dinners, no clothing requirement, and no rules that made people feel small. Just food that tastes wonderful. And respect. Zariah let out a long breath. "So you're giving this to me? I'm working with you. Quiet. Background. I'll never take credit." Zariah looked at him. He seemed older now. Not in a terrible sense, but as a man who had been carrying something heavy and finally let it down. And maybe that's what she needed too. To put the past behind you. To make place for what came after. She reached out her hand. He shook it. And just like that, everything was different. 3 months later, it was time to cut the ribbon. No red carpet. There are no famous cooks. There was a line around the block with the fragrance of garlic butter, cornbread, and faith in the air. That day, Zariah wore white. It was her mother's apron, which she had starched and ironed. And before she opened the doors, she stepped on a short step and said, "This location is for everyone who has ever been told they don't belong. Anyone who has been put next to the bathroom, not noticed, not worth as much as it is. This table is yours, this table." And they cheered. The menu board inside said, "Zariah's table. Every seat is a place of honor." And as customers came in, stories were told. And youngsters saw someone who looked like them running the show. Things changed. Not alone in that building, but everyone who is watching. And maybe, just maybe, someone who is viewing this tale right now needs to hear it. Because if you've ever been judged by your complexion, told to keep quiet in the break room, or told to sit by the bathroom, this is important to know. You are worth more. You should have a place at the table. And if no one gives you one, make your own. This is hidden worth. If this story touched you, pass it on. Tell us what words transformed your life. And don't forget that your tale could influence someone else's.